Good morning, everybody. I'm not sure who scheduled this for 8:30 on a Friday morning, but thank you all for being here. My name is Rick Eckstein, and it's a real pleasure to be here with you, and a true privilege to be able to introduce someone who has made it his life's mission to explore what makes us tick, buy, believe, and sometimes lose our minds. Professor Saad is many things. A world-renowned evolutionary behavioral scientist, a best-selling author, prolific public intellectual, and probably one of the most original voices in academia today. He's a professor of marketing at Concordia University, where he holds the prestigious research chair in evolutionary behavior science and Darwinian consumption. Over the past 2 decades, Professor Saad has carved out a unique space where biology, consumer behavior, and cultural commentary collide. His work helps explain everything from why we're drawn to certain brands to how ideologies spread like viruses, bypassing reason and hijacking our minds in the process. He's published in top academic journals, he's contributed to major media outlets, and reached millions through his lectures, bestsellers, and of course his bold, irrelevant podcast, The Saad Truth. And what makes him stand out is not just the depth of his knowledge, but it's his fearless approach to truth-telling. Whether dissecting consumer habits or confronting campus orthodoxy, he does it all with clarity, humor, and courage. In his powerful book, The Parasitic Mind, he lays out a stark warning. Bad ideas can spread like pathogens. And the reason, and the antidotes, reason, evidence, and intellectual freedom. His message is simple, but profound. Defend the truth even when it's uncomfortable. And here's the thing, he doesn't just talk about courage, he lives it. Born in Lebanon and raised amidst the chaos of civil war, Professor Saad knows what real physical fear feels like. His family fled to Canada to find safety and freedom, and he lived the Canadian dream. He built a life, a career, a family, and a platform rooted in reason and liberty. But today, in the aftermath of the October 7th attacks and the disturbing rise in anti-Semitism on campus, he's been forced into exile again. This time not from a war zone, but from his own university. The threats to his safety at Concordia have become so severe that he has taken a year-long leave of absence and is now teaching at an American institution. What a shame. What a shame, what a warning that someone who once fled for his life and then gave so much back to this country must now flee again just to survive. And yet he still speaks, he still stands, and he still invites us to think more clearly, act more courageously, and believe it or not, to laugh, even when it hurts. Please join me in giving a warm and meaningful welcome to Professor Saad.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, guys. I wore my velvet jacket for you. Okay, okay. So I got about 35 minutes, all right. Why is it not moving forward? Oh, here we go. So today what I'll do is I'll discuss a bit my background in Lebanon because it'll be relevant, as Rick mentioned, to some of the realities that are unfolding now in Canada. I thought I had put this in my rear view mirror, but it now comes back to haunt me again, and so I'll talk a bit about that, and then I'll discuss some of the parasitic ideas that some of you may know of if you've read my book, and then I'll briefly tease you with a few little tidbits from my forthcoming book on suicidal empathy. So let's get going. So this is my childhood in Lebanon. The photo on the left is actually very close to where I grew up, but the photo on the right is what I lived during the first year of the Lebanese Civil War. In the West, we manufacture victimology. I didn't have to manufacture victimology. In Lebanon, death awaited you everywhere you turned. My parents would tell me, if you're going to play outside, don't pass a particular line because that would open you up to the vision of the snipers that would blow your brain. So that's the kind of environment we grew up in. And of course, being Jewish, it became impossible to be in Lebanon. But just to give you, so this is, I always talk about this because it's the first episodic memory that I have of facing Jew hatred in Lebanon. I was 5 years old. This is 1970. I was almost 6. The gentleman on the left is Gamal Abdel Nasser, who was the Egyptian president, a very popular president because he was a pan-Arabist. He was trying to unite all the Arabs into one voice to get rid of the pesky Jews in Israel. When he passed away, as often happens in the Middle East, people go to the street to do all sorts of lamentations and incantations and so on. And what I kept hearing as a 5-year-old boy was death to Jews, death to Jews. And I turned to my mother wondering, why are they saying death to Jews? What do we have to do with this? And she goes, just keep your head down, keep quiet. And then the photo on the right, if you're going to call for our extermination, at least don't misspell us. At least have the dignity of, or the decency to spell us. So this is how the meme, the evil juice, if you ever hear me referring to Jews, I refer to them as the evil juice. It comes from this Einstein. This is an actual photo. I think it's probably the second to last photo prior to the start of the Civil War in 1975. And I'm in the first row, the second person from the left with the slightly longish hair. In that photo, there's a young kid who, when asked, we were each asked to stand up and tell the teacher what it is that we want to be when we grow up. I want to be a soccer player, I want to be a policeman, I want to be a fireman, I want to be a nurse. And this kid got up and said, when I grow up, I want to be a Jew killer, to raucous laughter and applause. Now, this is in tolerant, moderate Lebanon. This is in the Paris of the Middle East. So even when, the Jews weren't being rounded up for extermination, you still had to know your place. And regrettably, this is now what we're seeing in Canada with with great speed and alacrity. This is an actual newspaper from Lebanon, a clipping. One of my brothers was Lebanese champion in judo for several years, and it became embarrassing to the Lebanese authorities that a Jewish guy was winning every year the Lebanese championship. And so it was explained to him that it was time for him to retire, lest something bad might happen to him. And then he ended up leaving and pursuing his judo career in France. And the irony is that when we moved to Canada, the 1976 Olympics were happening in Montreal, which is where we moved to, and he ended up representing Lebanon in the 1976 Montreal Olympics. So the guy who was too Jewish to keep winning the championship in Lebanon, we can overlook his Judaism a few years later when you're representing us in the Montreal Olympics. That's tolerant and progressive Lebanon. This is the actual photo of my parents, who, thank God, are still alive. They're 94 and 90. Thank you. This is their 1950 marriage. It's the Middle East, so it's very old school. My mother was just about to turn 16. My father was about 20. And the reason I put their photo up, other than to honor them, is that on one of their return trips to Lebanon, after we had emigrated to Montreal, they still had business interests in Lebanon, and so they were kidnapped by Fatah, and some really bad things happened to them. But luckily, through some high political connections, they were able to be freed. So many of the things that we see today with the hostage taking and so on is something that we lived, 40 plus years ago. Now, this one is a very powerful one. I call it the Star of David has come full circle. The top passage is straight from the Parasitic Mind, but I'll just mention it to you here. The day that we left Lebanon, the actual day, when we cleared the Lebanese airspace, the pilot said, okay, we're now out of Lebanese airspace. My mother puts a Star of David around my neck and says, now you can wear this, be proud, and not hide your identity. Well, then if you look at the tweet below it, about 2 weeks after October 7th, this was something that my son said to me at almost the exact same age that I was when we escaped Lebanon back in the 70s. He had picked me up with my wife. He had just played a soccer match in the east end of Montreal, where there's a particular demographic group that is not very amenable to Jewish presence. And he said to me, if you had come to watch me play where I was today, and you were wearing a Star of David, you'd be dead, Daddy. So in 1975, I escaped Lebanon, and I can wear a Star of David. In 2023, I can't wear a Star of David in Montreal, Canada. This is, I think Rick mentioned this in his intro. This is an actual photo of SWAT police in Concordia University. And when I went to my administrator to say, this is insane what's happening with me with all the threats and so on, she said, there's absolutely no Jew hatred at Concordia. About a week or two later, I can't remember the exact temporal period, the president of Concordia was summoned to Ottawa to actually confirm that there is massive Jew hatred. Now, remember, the average Jewish student who's afraid to go to Concordia, people don't know that he's Jewish. People know who I am and know my position. So imagine try to walk in my shoes at Concordia. It's not easy. It's not pleasant. And, you know, regrettably, I've been warning people for decades about this. And, you know, people just are too busy in their lives. It's my daughter's graduation ceremony. I have to pick up the laundry. Let someone else worry about it. The problem is not going to go away, I assure you. So now let me get into a bit of the parasitic mind. So there are two sets of pathogens that affect us. The first one, of course, are biological pathogens. You should be a lot more afraid of mosquitoes than all other animals combined. They've killed way more people throughout history than, you know, the polar bear and the great white shark that you might be afraid of. It actually makes perfect adaptive sense for you to be afraid of the mosquito, as I am. So, of course, you've got bacteria, you've got viruses, parasites, fungi. But I argue in the parasitic mind that there's a second class of pathogens, ideological pathogens, parasitic ideas, that can completely zombify our ability to think clearly. And so what the book does is it discusses all of these parasitic ideas, which I'll spend a few minutes talking about here, and then it hopefully offers an effective vaccine with no side effects. So what are some parasitic manifestations in nature? Well, the spider wasp, you see it on, at least to my left, it will sting a much larger spider, rendering it zombified, but completely alive. It carries it to its burrow, lays eggs on it, and then as the offspring hatch, they eat the spider in vivo. Well, I analogize this to political correctness. Political correctness is the spider's wasp, right? Just walk merrily to the abyss of infinite lunacy while then all irrational movements consume you from within. That's what we've seen. The one on the right with the mouse and the cat, this is Toxoplasma gondii, which is actually a neuroparasite that can also afflict human beings. It actually causes human beings to engage in riskier behavior if they are parasitized by this brain worm. In the case of the mouse, it makes evolutionary sense for it to be afraid of cats. When it is parasitized, it actually becomes sexually attracted to the cat's urine, which is not a very good attraction to have if you're a mouse. The other example is of something that we see in Canada, moose, ungulates, so elk, moose, deer. When they are parasitized by this particular brain worm, they lose their innate mechanism of fleeing when they see predators, and they just engage in this circling behavior, unable to extricate themselves from this kind of repetitive behavior as the predators come in. Again, you can see the analogy that I'm setting up here with ideological neuroparasites. The top one is a wood cricket. The wood cricket abhors water. It wants nothing to do with water. But when it is parasitized by a hairworm, in order for the hairworm to complete its reproductive cycle, it needs to happen in water. And so when it is parasitized, the wood cricket will merrily jump and commit suicide in the service of the reproductive interests of the hairworm. Again, you can see how, yes, some women have penises is exactly you being a parasitized wood cricket, okay? So the bottom, now let's look at some human manifestations of this. Queers for Palestine is the ultimate human manifestation of a wood cricket. Yes? It's geese for foie gras. Okay? And then we've got Jewish Anna Epstein, who's a lot more progressive and enlightened than all of you degenerates. And that's why when the October 7th happened, she was at Boston University. She was, with great alacrity, she went and pulled down the posters of the babies who were kidnapped because she's very, very progressive, right? But had she been at the Nova Dance Festival, she wouldn't have been afforded any reciprocity, and she would have been gang raped and burned and killed like all of the other 1,200, but she's much smarter than all of you. This is another Jewish wood cricket, Tal Nitzan, who was, during her PhD at Hebrew University, which is a prestigious university in Jerusalem, was doing some research to try to demonstrate that the IDF engages in rampant rape of Palestinian women. To her dismay, when she conducted the research, she found out that there wasn't a single documented case of such rapes. Now, an honest scientist, once the evidence comes in and it refutes your hypothesis, you go, okay, this happens. You throw the dice in science, and sometimes it doesn't work out. No, but she has to ensure that she is epistemologically clean. So did she revise her opinion that IDF soldiers are devils? No. She then spinned it as follows. Now, I'm glad you're all sitting down because otherwise you'll get woozy. The IDF soldiers are so evil, they so marginalize as subhumans the Palestinian women that they don't even consider them worthy of rape. So had she found that they raped them, they would have been evil. And if she finds that they didn't rape her, it also confirms that they're evil. Therefore, there is no way to falsify that premise. We know in science, Popper's falsification principle is anything that cannot be falsified cannot be within the realm of reason, of science. And so this is exactly what she's doing. She's literally anti-scientific. Here's another very, very enlightened guy. This is Karsten Nordal Hawken. Not only is he parasitized, but he's also suicidally empathetic. He was raped by a Somali immigrant in Norway. After the Somali rapist served his sentence, not a particularly harsh sentence, because the Norwegians, again, are kind. They don't believe in retribution. He felt very bad, he, the victim, because the Somali was going to be deported back to Somalia, where he wouldn't have the chance to maximally flourish. And that made the victim of the rape feel guilty. Well, I'm here to tell you as an evolutionary psychologist that our emotional system did not evolve to particularly care about the future flourishing trajectory of our rapists. But when you are suicidally empathetic, you do care about your rapist. Oh, sorry. So what are examples of viruses of the human mind? Well, there are many. The one smack in the center is the granddaddy of them all. It's postmodernism. Postmodernism purports that there are no objective truths other than the one objective truth that there are no objective truths. So we already have an epistemological problem there. Now, for those of you who may have seen this next story, apologies, but I think it's still worth repeating even if you've seen it. And if you haven't seen it, buckle up, it's going to get fun. So in 2002, I was going out with my wife. We didn't have children yet. and one of my doctoral students who had just defended his PhD, and we were going out to celebrate. So this is 23 years ago. So way before, the transgender craze, men too can menstruate and so on. This is well over 2 decades ago. And he calls me a few hours prior to our dinner to say, oh, I just want to give you a heads up. I'm bringing a date along. I just want to tell you that she's a graduate student in postmodernism, women's studies, and cultural anthropology, to which I answered, so the holy trinity of bullshit. I said, oh, but I got you. I get it. This is your night. I'm going to be on my best behavior. Don't worry about me, which of course was a lie. About halfway through the night, I turned to this lady and I said, so I hear you're a graduate student in postmodernism, and at one of the leading universities in Canada, if not the leading university in Canada. She said, yes. I said, well, I'm an evolutionary behavioral scientist. I believe, for example, that there is a universal human nature. There are human universals. Do you mind if I propose something that I would consider to be universal, and then we can discuss it? She goes, yeah, go ahead. This is 23 years ago, so this is, again, as I said, way before transgenderism. I said, is it not true that within Homo sapiens only women bear children? Is that not a universal? So she scoffs at my imbecility, my simple mind, and she says, no, that's not true. I said, how is it not true? She said, well, within some Japanese tribe, off some Japanese island, within the folkloric realm, within the mythological realm of their society, it is the men who bear children. So by you restricting it to the biological realm, that's how you keep us barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. So after I recovered from the mini stroke that I had at hearing this, I then said, okay, well, maybe it was a bit too controversial for me to say something as corrosive and as divisive as only women bear children. So let me take a slightly less controversial example. And you'll see in a second the photo on the right, why there's a hyena there that appears to be dancing. I said, is it not true since time immemorial that sailors have relied on the premise that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west? And there she used a variant of postmodernism. It's called deconstructionism, right? It's Jacques Derrida. And she said, well, what do you mean by east and west? What do you mean by the sun? That which you call the sun, I might call dancing hyena. I said, well, fine, the dancing hyena rises in the east and sets in the west. She said, I don't play those label games. Now, why do I almost always tell this story? Because it perfectly captures the parasitized lunacy. If I am sitting with a grown adult who is a graduate student at a leading university in Canada, and we can't have a space of shared meaning where we agree that for a sexually dimorphic, sexually reproducing species called Homo sapiens, one of the two sexes bears the children, and we can't agree that there's this thing called a star called the sun, then where can we take that, quote, knowledge? It's complete intellectual terrorism. And so that's exactly what I've been warning for decades in academia. And I say this not to be gleeful, I told you so, but because it's very frustrating, because I was standing on top of the mountain telling people, this is all coming for you. I live it every day. I sit on those granting committees where every single paper is on queer mathematics, feminist architecture, transgender literature, and so on. Okay? This is, because I'm speaking in a Canadian forum, I tried to give examples from Canada. This is from a few years ago. It's been updated, but not for the better in terms of the results. These are 60 universities ranked on 4 metrics that relate to freedom. And so you could have up to 240 A's. If every university got on every metric an A, you'd have 240 A's. There were 6 A's out of 240. That gives you a sense of the state of affairs on Canadian campuses. And it's only gotten worse since 2017. This is yours truly and Jordan Peterson. We were supposed to speak at an event. It used to be called Ryerson University. Of course, that we found out that he was racist, so now it's called Toronto Metropolitan University. The event that we were supposed to speak at was titled "The Stifling of Free Speech on University Campus." Guess what happened at that? It was canceled. And the screenshot on the right is actually a real screenshot. We don't want neo-Nazis in Toronto. I'm Jewish. This is at UBC. Lorna June McHugh was a professor in the law faculty. She hadn't published much, which of course is needed for tenure. She then decided that she was going to levy a human rights, complaint because she's indigenous. And in indigenous society, knowledge is transmitted through oral means, and therefore to ask her to, write things would be contrary to her indigenous heritage. And it actually was taken the case. You didn't laugh her out of the room, but instead you sort of acquiesced. Yes, oh yes. Well, guess what? Jewish history is also based on originally oral tradition. We should have told all those Jewish Nobel laureates not to do this whole writing thing. This is at Trent University, a seminar on it's okay to be against whites. This is very recent, so get ready. This is at University of Waterloo. As you know, University of Waterloo would be sort of the Canadian equivalent to the high engineering and tech universities in the US, MIT or Caltech, right? Fortran was created, one of the early languages in computer science was created at University of Waterloo. So it's a serious engineering and computer science school. So they had calls for Canada Research Chairs, which are the highest chaired professorships that are endowed by the Canadian government. So this is this is the epitome of your academic prestige. So the first one, position, this is an actual screenshot, right? This is not my satire. This is not me being hyperbolic. This is an actual screenshot. All areas of artificial intelligence are welcome to apply, but the call is only open to qualified individuals who self-identify as women, transgender, gender fluid, non-binary, or two-spirit. Now, I have a mathematics and computer science degree, and I feel great shame today that when I learned computer science and mathematics, we didn't incorporate queer methodology within our computer architecture. This is at UBC, also Canada Research Chair in oral cancer research. It's only reserved to people who self-identify as part of a racialized minority. So based on that metric, self-identify, Chief Lies-A-Lot Elizabeth Warren could totally have applied to this position, because it doesn't matter whether you truly are of a particular heritage. It's what you self-identify as. By the way, I appeared in front of the Canadian Senate in 2017 when I was warning about some of the consequences of Bill C-16, and I exactly predicted this. And the Liberal senators, if you go back and watch it, were laughing and scoffing and mocking. I'm still waiting to receive the apology letter. This is at my home university, Concordia University, our 5-year strategic plan. Number one, it's a screenshot, it's real, is to indigenize and decolonize the entire curriculum, everything. You teach neuroscience, indigenize that. You teach pure mathematics, indigenize that. And so in my case, I teach courses like evolutionary psychology, psychology of decision-making, consumer psychology, parasitic mind. I would have to look for ways to indigenize that. This is, you might remember a few years ago, a Quebec deputy minister got into a lot of pushback when he said that when you're doing an environmental study and impact of for the environment, there's only science that matters. There is no alternative ways of knowing, because they were saying, well, you should use indigenous ways of knowing, and then he had to walk back those words. There is no other epistemology than the scientific method. It's the scientific method that liberates us from the shackles of our personal identity. That's what makes science so beautiful. There is no Lebanese Jewish way of doing evolutionary psychology. There's just evolutionary psychology. And yet, he got into hot waters. I'm here to tell you that the very, very important human rights issue in Canada, which is that we achieve menstrual equity. I was unaware that women weren't freely allowed to menstruate in Canada, but there was a one-day symposium at Concordia on menstrual equity. This is happening in the 21st century at a major Canadian university with your taxpayer dollars. This is the Senate hearing that I was at. This is the gentleman that I subsequently referred to as Senator Genocide, because when it was time for the Q&A period, he sort of looked at me with, very dismissively and said, by the way, my testimony was very sober. It was basically just saying that we're a sexually reproducing species. There really is a way to define what is male or female, and so on and so forth. And he said that I was promoting a genocide of transgender people, to which I said, one has to be careful to accuse someone with my background of committing genocide. But this is the kind of discourse that we had. This was, I think, in 2017. I receive all the time emails of how I'm going to be a better ally to women in my job as a professor, which I always answer. I address everybody the same way. I interact with everybody the same way. As long as they're intellectually curious, they could be anything, it doesn't matter. But the reality is that the victimology narrative is no longer true. Women outnumber men in every single imaginable way. This is just data from medical school. But in everything, women outnumber men. In the United States, for associate's degree, bachelor's degree, master's degree, and doctoral degree across every single race group, women outnumber men. But yet I receive 25 emails a day. How are you going to be a better ally to women? Shouldn't we revise our victimology narrative when it no longer applies? No, we shouldn't. Ostrich parasitic syndrome is something that I discuss in chapter 6 of The Parasitic Mind. It refers to, metaphorically, the ostrich doesn't actually do this, but it refers to the idea that you bury your head in sand and la la la, I don't want to hear it. So there have been 47,000 plus terror attacks committed by Islamic terrorists since 9/11 alone in nearly 70 countries. The terrorists who've committed the 47,000 terror attacks tell you exactly why they've committed it. And they justify it via their canonical material in their holy books. Yes? But Westerners are much more suicidally empathetic, and therefore they come up with alternate explanations because you don't want to marginalize the noble religion of perpetual peace. And so here are some of them. I won't go through all of them. These are not satirical. I can give you the link to every single one of them. Many of them were espoused by professors. So it turns out that if you look at the fourth one, if you don't have enough adequate exposure to art, that could radicalize you. Who amongst us who didn't see enough Modigliani, Chagall, and Picasso didn't end up joining ISIS to throw gays off the buildings in Raqqa, Syria? It's a direct correlation between not enough Chagall and Picasso and becoming a terror attack. These are professors who propose this, right? Aren't professors supposed to be the purveyors and defenders of truth? Here's another one. I'll just mention one. This is from your favorite science guy, Bill Nye, who explained to us that the Bataclan attack in Paris, where they scream Allahu Akbar as they mow down everybody, was very conceivably due to solar panels and climate change. And then he offers a causal explanation for that. Well, when you are that removed from reality, when you are so suicidally empathetic, then you shouldn't be surprised to see what is happening in Canada. It's sometimes difficult to face reality, but if you don't face it, it's not going to go away. If the physician tells you you have stage 4 pancreatic cancer, you could pretend that cancer doesn't exist. It's still going to exist, and it's still going to kill you. So wake up. I'm looking at the time, so I want to try to be as quick as I can. My next book, what it does, so Parasitic Mind looked at What happens to our cognitive system when it is parasitized? What happens to our thinking ability? Suicidal empathy completes the story in saying, well, we're both a thinking and feeling animal. Well, for me to completely zombify you, I need to also hijack your emotional system. And so what my next book will do is do what Parasitic Mind did, but to our emotional system. So how do we save our universities? I'll try to. I might be a minute late, so I hope you'll give me grace. How to save our universities: pursue knowledge unencumbered by ideological activism. No knowledge is forbidden if gathered objectively using the scientific method. We often have in universities, don't do this research, it might marginalize this group. No. It's a deontological process. It's an absolute principle, right? I don't modulate the truth so that I don't hurt someone's feelings. The truth is the truth, irrespective of whose feelings are hurt. Freedom of speech, freedom of inquiry, and the pursuit of truth are deontological principles. No more identity politics and victimology poker and oppression Olympics. No more coddling of the culture of offense. I had another slide I wanted to do, but I don't think I'll have time. A just society is rooted in the ethos of a meritocracy. Everything in Canadian academics is based on, people say DEI, I prefer DIE, because DIE is a better acronym. It's where meritocracy and excellence goes to die. If you want to apply for a grant, you have to do a DIE statement. So it's been about 7-8 years that I no longer have research money because I refuse to play that game. I can't be coming up in front of you here saying how bad diversity, equity, inclusion is. Thank you. But then when nobody's looking, to play along. And so that's the cost you have to bear. Promote an ethos of intellectual and political diversity. And just to show you here, you probably can't read this too well. This is the ratio of Democrats to Republicans across disciplines in the United States. It's as bad in Canada. And you have fields where you would be more likely to run into a unicorn, a winged horse unicorn, than you are to run into a Republican professor in the sociology department. That's probably not a good thing. Now, there are some fields where my political orientation as a professor doesn't matter. Neuroscience is neuroscience. The distribution of prime numbers is the distribution of prime numbers. But for many disciplines that have a social implication, then it certainly makes sense to have professors who might be coming at the problem from different perspectives. We cheat our students when we don't do that. And then just to wrap up, so last slide. Number 8, promote an ethos of interdisciplinarity. Consilience means unity of knowledge. One of the things that every university does, it always says we want to promote interdisciplinarity. But the second that you try to go and implement an interdisciplinary program, every single dean suddenly becomes very territorial over their discipline. So from this side of the mouth, we want to be interdisciplinary. From this side of our mouth, shut it down. And so great ideas in science always come at the cusp or the intersection of disciplines. And so let's promote that. Number 9 is really an important one. Encourage bold thinking in academia. Encourage bold thinking. Academia should be about the forming of intellectual Navy SEALs and not bean counters. I've often joked, and people say, oh, well, why are you being insulting to your colleagues? I've said that I've discovered a new species. They're called academics, and they're known as the invertebrate castrati. They don't have a spine, and you can fill in the rest. And that is literally true. They're afraid of their shadow, yet they are protected by tenure. So you would think that there is a mechanism that ensures that you be courageous and bold, and yet most of them, if I go boo, they go hide in the corner. That's not what we want from our thought leaders. Strike the right balance between specialization and generalization. Number 11 is kind of relevant to a friend of mine in the United States. Remove the stifling bureaucracy in academia, implement something akin to Doge within institutions. If you want to do some research study and you want to clear the ethics board, it sometimes can take you 6 months to clear it, where you might no longer be interested in that problem. And then finally, science, reason, logic, and a commitment to evidence-based thinking trumps ideology, hurt feelings, and fashionable anti-science, faux intellectual gibberish. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Saad, for that fascinating speech.
Dr. Saad, before you run away, that was incredible. Jordan Peterson has this theory that Western civilization is crumbling, and we have to, because of wokeness and DEI, and that we have to rebuild it. And I think you explained that probably in better words than I've ever heard Jordan explain it. Scared the hell out of me, quite frankly. But I hope you all enjoyed that, Dr. Saad. Thank you very, very much.
Cheers. Thank you. Thanks, guys.